And the first verse. After Solomon had completed building the temple of God in his own palace, all the projects he had set his heart on doing, God appeared to Solomon again, just as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. And God said to him, I've listened to and received all your prayers, your ever so passionate prayers. I've sanctified this temple that you've built. My name is stamped on it forever. My eyes are on it. My heart is in it always. As for you, if you live in my presence as your father David lived, pure in heart and action, living the life I've set out for you, attentively obedient to my guidance and judgments, then I'll back your kingly rule over Israel. Make it a sure thing on a solid foundation. The same guarantee I gave David your father, I'm giving you. You can count on always having a descendant on Israel's throne. But if you or your sons betray me, ignoring my guidance and judgments, taken up with alien gods by serving and worshiping them, then the guarantee is off. I'll wipe Israel right off the map and repudiate this temple I've just sanctified to honor my name. And Israel will become nothing but a bad joke among the peoples of the world. And this temple, splendid as it is now, will become an object of contempt. Visitors will shake their heads saying, whatever happened here? What's the story behind these ruins? Then they'll be told the people who used to live here betrayed God, the very God who rescued their ancestors from Egypt. They took up with alien gods, worshiping and serving them. That's what's behind this God-visited devastation. At the end of 20 years, having built the two buildings, the temple of God and his personal palace, Solomon rewarded Hiram, king of Tyre, with a gift of 20 villages in the district of Galilee. Hiram had provided him with all the cedar and cypress and gold that he wanted. But when Hiram left Tyre to look over the villages that Solomon had given him, he didn't like what he saw. He said, what kind of reward is this, my friend? 20 backwoods hick towns? People still refer to them that way. Backwoods hick towns. This is all Hiram got from Solomon in exchange for 4.5 tons of gold. This is the work record of the labor force that King Solomon raised to build the temple of God, his palace, the defense complex, other words known as the Milo, Jerusalem wall, and the fortified cities of Hazar, Megiddo, and Gezer. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had come up and captured Gezer, torched it, and killed all the Canaanites who lived there. He gave it as a wedding present to his daughter, Solomon's wife. So Solomon rebuilt Gezer. That's what it was about. It was a political alliance to marry her. He also built Lower Beth Horon, Baalath, and Tamar in the desert, the backcountry storehouse villages and villages for chariots and horses. Solomon built widely and extravagantly in Jerusalem, in Lebanon, and wherever he fancied. The remnants from the original inhabitants of the land, Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, all non-Israelites, survivors of holy wars, were rounded up by Solomon for his gangs of slave labor. The policy is still in effect. But true Israelites were not treated this way. They were used in his army and administration, government leaders and commanders of his chariots and charioteers. They were also the project managers responsible for Solomon's building operations, 550 of them in charge of the workforce. It was after Pharaoh's daughter ceremonially ascended from the city of David and took up residence in the house built especially for her that Solomon built the defense complex, the Milo. 3 times a year, Solomon worshiped at the altar of God, sacrificing whole burnt offerings and peace offerings and burning incense in the presence of God. Everything that had to do with the temple, he did generously and well. He didn't skimp. And ships, King Solomon also built ships at Ezion-Geber, located near Elath and Edom on the Red Sea. Hiram sent seaworthy sailors to assist Solomon's men with the fleet. They embarked for Ophir, brought back 16 tons of gold, and presented it to King Solomon. 1 Kings 10:1, the Queen of Sheba visits. The Queen of Sheba heard about Solomon and his connection with the name of God. She came to put his reputation to test by asking tough questions. She made a grand and showy entrance into Jerusalem, camels loaded with spices, a huge amount of gold and precious gems. She came to Solomon and talked about all the things that she cared about, emptying her heart to him. Solomon answered everything she put to him. Nothing stumped him. When the Queen of Sheba experienced for herself Solomon's wisdom and saw with her own eyes the palace he had built, the meals that were served, the impressive array of court officials, sharply dressed waiters, the lavish crystal, and the elaborate worship, extravagant with whole burnt offerings at the steps leading up to the temple of God, it took her breath away. She said to the king, "It's all true. Your reputation for accomplishment and wisdom that reached all the way to my country is confirmed. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it for myself." They didn't exaggerate. Such wisdom and elegance, far more than I could ever have imagined. Lucky the men and women who work for you, getting to be around you every day and hear your wise words firsthand. And blessed be God, your God, who took such a liking to you and made you king. Clearly, God's love for Israel is behind this, making you king to keep a just order and nurture a God-pleasing people. She then gave the king 4.5 tons of gold and also sack after sack of spices and expensive gems. There hasn't been a cargo of spices like that since that shipload the queen of Sheba brought to King Solomon. The ships of Hiram also imported gold from Ophir along with tremendous loads of fragrant sandalwood and expensive gems. The king used the sandalwood for fine cabinetry in the temple of God and the palace complex for making harps and dulcimers for the musicians. Nothing like that shipment of sandalwood has been seen since. King Solomon, for his part, gave the queen of Sheba all her heart's desire, everything she asked for on top of what he had already so generously given her. Satisfied, she returned home with her train of servants. Solomon received 25 tons of gold in tribute annually. This was above and beyond the taxes and profit on trade with merchants and assorted kings and governors. King Solomon crafted 200 body-length shields of hammered gold, 7.5 pounds of gold to each shield, and 300 smaller shields about half that size. He stored the shields in the house of the forest of Lebanon. The king built a massive throne of ivory accented with a veneer of gold. The throne had 6 steps leading up to it, its back shaped like an arch. The armrests on each side were flanked by lions. 12 of them, were placed at either end of the 6 steps. There was no throne like it in any of the surrounding kingdoms. King Solomon's chalices and tankards were made of gold, and all the dinnerware and serving utensils in the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver. Silver was considered common and cheap. The king had a fleet of ocean-going ships at sea with Hiram's ships. Every 3 years, the fleet would bring in a cargo of gold, silver, and ivory, and apes and peacocks. King Solomon was wiser and richer than all the kings of the earth. He surpassed them all. People came from all over the world to be with Solomon and drink in the wisdom God had given him. And everyone who came brought gifts, artifacts of gold and silver, fashionable robes and gowns, the latest in weapons, exotic spices, horses and mules, parades of visitors year after year. Solomon collected chariots and horses, 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses. He stabled them in the special chariot cities as well as in Jerusalem. The king made silver as common as rocks and cedar as common as fig trees in the lowland hills. His horses were brought in from Egypt and Cilicia, specially acquired by the king's agents. Chariots from Egypt went for 15 pounds of silver and a horse for about 3 3/4 pounds of silver. Solomon carried on a brisk horse trading business with the Hittite and Aramean royal houses. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1. King Solomon was obsessed with women. Pharaoh's daughter was only the first of many foreign women he loved. Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, Hittite. He took them from the surrounding pagan nations of which God had clearly warned Israel. You must not marry them. They'll seduce you into infatuations with their gods. Solomon fell in love with them anyway, refusing to give them up. He had 700 royal wives and 300 concubines, 1,000 women in all, and they did seduce him away from God. As Solomon grew older, his wives beguiled him with their alien gods, and he became unfaithful. He didn't stay true to his God, the God of his father David, as his father David had done. Solomon took up with Ashtoreth, the whore goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the horrible god of the Ammonites. Solomon openly defied God. He did not follow in his father David's footsteps. He went on to build a sacred shrine to Chemosh, the horrible god of Moab, and to Molech, the horrible god of the Ammonites, on a hill just east of Jerusalem. He built similar shrines for all his foreign wives, who then polluted the countryside with the smoke and stench of their sacrifices. God was furious with Solomon for abandoning the God of Israel, the God who had twice appeared to him and had so clearly commanded him not to fool around with other gods. Solomon faithlessly disobeyed God's orders. God said to Solomon, since this is the way it is with you, that you have no intention of keeping faith with me and doing what I've commanded, I'm going to rip the kingdom from you and hand it over to someone else. But out of respect for your father, David, I won't do it in your lifetime. It's your son who will pay. I'll rip it right out of his grasp. Even then, I won't take it all. I'll leave in one tribe and honor my servant David, and out of respect for my chosen city, Jerusalem. God incited Hadad, a descendant of the king of Edom, into hostile actions against Solomon. Years earlier, when David devastated Edom, Joab, the commander of the army, on his way to bury the dead, massacred all the men of Edom. Joab and his army stayed there for 6 months, making sure they had killed every man in Edom. Hadad, just a boy at the time, had escaped with some of the Edomites who had worked for his father. Their escape route took them through Midian to Paran. They picked up some men in Paran and went on to Egypt and to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave Hadad a house, food, and even land. Pharaoh liked him so well that he gave him the sister of his wife, Queen Taphanes, in marriage. She bore Hadad a son named Genubath, who was raised like one of the royal family. Genubath grew up in the palace with Pharaoh's children. While living in Egypt, Hadad heard that both David and Joab, commander of the army, were dead. He approached Pharaoh and said, "Send me off with your blessing. I want to return to my country." "But why?" said Pharaoh. "Why would you want to leave here? Hasn't everything been to your liking?" "Everything's been just fine," said Hadad, "but I want to go home. Give me a good send-off." 1 Kings chapter 12, Rehoboam. Rehoboam traveled to Shechem, where all Israel had gathered to inaugurate him as king. Jeroboam had been in Egypt, where he had taken asylum from King Solomon. When he got the report of Solomon's death, he had come back. Now, wait a minute. How we jump from Solomon living to Solomon dead? Okay, we've skipped too far. No, we did the same thing. Let's see. Oh, we didn't finish reading the whole chapter. That's what's wrong. All right, we're back in chapter 11, verse 23 through 25. I know something was wrong there. Solomon couldn't have died that quickly. All right, then God incited another adversary against Solomon, Rezin, son of Eliada, who had deserted his master from his master, Hadadezer, king of Zobah. After King David's slaughter of the Arameans, Rezin collected a band of outlaws and became their leader. They later settled in Damascus, where Rezin eventually took over as king. Like Hadad, Rezin was a thorn in Israel's side all of Solomon's life. He was king over Aram, and he hated Israel. Adversaries arise. And then the last straw. Jeroboam, son of Nebat, rebelled against the king. He was an Ephraimite from Zeradah, his mother a widow named Zeruiah. He served in Solomon's administration. This is why he rebelled. Solomon had built the outer defense system, the Milo, and had restored the fortifications that were in disrepair from the time of his father David. Jeroboam stood out during the construction as strong and able. When Solomon observed that he was a good worker, he put the young man in charge of the entire workforce of the tribe of Judah. One day, Jeroboam was walking down the road out of Jerusalem. Ahijah, the prophet of Shiloh, wearing a brand new cloak, met him. The two of them were alone on that remote stretch of road. Ahijah took off the new cloak that he was wearing and ripped it into 12 pieces. Then he said to Jeroboam, "Take 10 of these pieces for yourself. This is by order of the God of Israel." See what I'm doing? I'm ripping the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and giving you 10 of the tribes. In honor of my servant David and out of respect for Jerusalem, the city I specially chose, he will get 1 tribe. And here's the reason. He faithlessly abandoned me and went off worshiping Ashtaroth, goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, god of the Moabites, and Molech, god of the Ammonites. He hasn't lived the way I've shown him, hasn't done what I've wanted, and hasn't followed directions or obeyed orders as his father David did. Still, I won't take the whole kingdom away from him. I'll stick with him through his lifetime because of my servant David, whom I chose and who did follow my directions and obey my orders. But after that, I'll remove the kingdom from his son's control and give you 10 tribes. I'll leave 1 tribe to his son to maintain a witness to my servant David in Jerusalem, the city I chose as a memorial to my name. But I've taken you in hand. Rule to your heart's content. You are to be the king of Israel. If you listen to what I tell you and live the way I show you and do what pleases me, following directions and obeying orders as my servant David did, I'll stick with you no matter what. I'll build you a kingdom as solid as the one I built for David. Israel will be yours. I'm bringing pain and trouble on David's descendants, but the trials won't last forever. Solomon ordered the assassination of Jeroboam, but he got away to Egypt and found asylum there with King Shishak. He remained in exile until Solomon died. The rest of Solomon's life and rule, his work and his wisdom, you can read for yourself in the Chronicles of Solomon. Solomon ruled in Jerusalem over all Israel for 40 years. He died and was buried in the city of David, his father. His son Rehoboam was the next king. Now we pick up with 1 Kings chapter 12, Rehoboam. Rehoboam traveled to Shechem, where all Israel had gathered to inaugurate him as king. Jeroboam had been in Egypt, where he had taken asylum from King Solomon. When he got the report of Solomon's death, he had came back. Rehoboam assembled Jeroboam and all the people. They said to Rehoboam, "Your father made life hard for us, worked our fingers to the bone. Give us a break, lighten up on us, and we'll willingly serve you." "Give me 3 days to think it over, then come back," Rehoboam said. King Rehoboam talked it over with the elders who advised his father when he was alive. "What's your counsel? How do you suggest that I answer the people?" They said, "If you will be a servant to this people Be considerate of their needs and respond with compassion. Work things out with them. They'll end up doing anything for you. But he rejected the counsel of the elders and asked the young men he'd grown up with, who were now currying his favor. What do you think? What should I say to these people who are saying, give us a break from your father's harsh ways, lighten up on us? The young Turks he'd grown up with said, these people who complain, your father's too hard on us, lighten up. Well, tell them this. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. If you think life under my father was hard, you haven't seen the half of it. My father thrashed you with whips, but I'll beat you bloody with chains. Jesus. 3 days later, Jeroboam, stupid to take that advice. 3 days later, Jeroboam and the people showed up, just as Rehoboam had directed, when he said, give me 3 days to think it over, then come back. The king's answer was harsh and rude. He spurned the counsel of the elders and went with the advice of the younger set. If you think life was under my father was hard, you haven't seen the half of it. My father thrashed you with whips. I'll beat you bloody with chains. Rehoboam turned a deaf ear to the people. God was behind all this, confirming the message that he'd given to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through Ahijah of Shiloh. When all Israel realized that the king hadn't listened to a word they said, they stood up to him and said, get lost, David. We've had it with you, son of Jesse. Let's get out of here, Israel, and fast. From now on, David, mind your own business. And with that, they left. But Rehoboam continued to rule those who lived in the towns of Judah. When King Rehoboam sent out Adoniram, head of the workforce, the Israelites ganged upon him, pelted him with stones, and killed him. King Rehoboam jumped in his chariot and fled to Jerusalem as fast as he could. Israel has been in rebellion against the Davidic regime ever since. That's not rebellion. You talk hard to them. Talk about you going to beat them bloody. Jeroboam of Israel. When the word was out that Jeroboam was back and available, the assembled people invited him and inaugurated him king over all Israel. The only tribe left to the Davidic dynasty was Judah. When Rehoboam got back to Jerusalem, he called up the men of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 of their best soldiers, to go to war against Israel and recover the kingdom for Rehoboam, son of Solomon. At this time, the word of God came to Shemaiah, a man of God. Tell this to Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, along with everyone in Judah and Benjamin, and anyone else who is around. This is God's word. Don't you march out. Don't fight against your brothers, the Israelites. Go back home, every last one of you. I'm in charge here. And they did it. They did what God said and went home. Jeroboam made a fort at Shechem in the hills of Ephraim and made that his headquarters. He also built a fort at Penuel. But then Jeroboam thought, it won't be long before the kingdom is reunited under David. As soon as these people resume worship at the temple of God in Jerusalem, they'll start thinking of Rehoboam, king of Judah, as their ruler. Then they'll kill me and go back to King Rehoboam. So the king came up with a plan. He made 2 golden calves, and he announced, it's too much trouble for you to go to Jerusalem and worship. Look at these, the gods who brought you out of Egypt. He put one calf in Bethel, the other he placed in Dan. This was blatant sin. Think of it. People traveling all the way to Dan to worship a calf. You didn't learn nothing from the golden calf incident? And that wasn't the end of it. Jeroboam built forbidden shrines all over the place and recruited priests from wherever he could find them, regardless of whether they were fit for the job or not. To top it off, he created a holy New Year festival to be held on the 15th day of the 8th month to replace the one in Judah. Complete the worship offered on the altar at Bethel and sacrificing before the calves he had set up there. He staffed Bethel with priests from the local shrines he had made. This was strictly his own idea to compete with the feast in Judah, and he carried it off with flair, a festive exclusively for Israel. Jeroboam himself leading the worship at the altar. 1 Kings 13. And then this happened. Just as Jeroboam was at the altar about to make an offering, a holy man came from Judah by God's command and preached. These were God's orders to the altar. Altar, altar, God's message. A son will be born into David's family named Josiah. The priest from the shrines who are making offerings on you, he will sacrifice on you. Human bones burned on you. At the same time, he announced a sign. This is the proof God gives. The altar was split into pieces and the holy offering spilled into the dirt. When the king heard the message the holy man preached against the altar at Bethel, he reached out to grab him, yelling, arrest him. But his arm was paralyzed and hung useless. At the same time, the altar broke apart and the holy offerings all spilled into the dirt, the very sign the holy man had announced by God's command. The king pleaded with the holy man, help me. Pray to God for the healing of my arm. The holy man prayed for him and the king's arm was healed as good as new. Then the king invited the holy man, join me for a meal. I have a gift for you. The holy man told the king, not on your life. You can pay me enough to get me to sit down with you at a meal in this place. I'm here under God's orders, and he commanded, don't eat a crumb, don't drink a drop, and don't go back the way you came. Then he left on a different road than the one on which he walked to Bethel. There was an old prophet who lived in Bethel. His sons came and told him the story of what the holy man had done that day in Bethel, told him everything that had happened and what the holy man had said to the king. Their father said, which way did he go? His sons pointed out on the road that the holy man from Judah had taken. He told his son, saddle my donkey. When they saddled it, he got on and rode after the holy man. He found him sitting under an oak tree. He asked him, are you the holy man who came from Judah? Yes, I am, he said. Well, come home with me and have a meal. Sorry, I can't do that, the holy man said. I can neither go back with you nor eat with you in this country. I'm under strict orders from God. Don't eat a crumb, don't drink a drop, and don't come back the way you came. But he said, I'm a prophet just like you, and an angel came to me with a message from God. Bring him home with you and give him a good meal. You're a lying wonder. But the man was lying. That's right, he was a lying wonder. So the holy man went home with him, and they had a meal together. They were there sitting at the table together. Then the word of God came to the prophet who had brought him back. He confronted the holy man who had come from Judah. Now, how are you going to confront this man, but you're not going to confront your lying? Double standard. God's word to you. You disobeyed God's command. You didn't keep the strict orders your God gave you. You came back and sat down to a good meal in the very place God told you. Don't eat a crumb. Don't drink a drop. For that, you're going to die far from home and not be buried in your ancestral tomb. When the meal was over, the prophet who had brought him back saddled his donkey for him. Down the road away, a lion met him and killed him. His corpse lay crumbled on the road, the lion on one side, the donkey on the other. Some passerby saw the corpse in a heap on the road with the lion standing guard beside it. They went to the village where the old prophet lived and told him what he had seen. When the prophet who had gotten him off track heard it, he said, it's the holy man who disobeyed God's strict orders. God turned him over to the lion who knocked him around and killed him just as God had told him. But God didn't tell you not to lie. God didn't tell you not to be a deceiver. Thank God for the New Testament. The prophet told his son, saddle my donkey. They did it. He rode out and found the corpse in a heap on the road with the lion and the donkey standing there. What was the whole purpose of you going deceiving the man anyways? To kill him. What was your whole purpose? There was no purpose to that. The lion hadn't bothered either the corpse or the donkey. The old prophet loaded the corpse of the holy man on his donkey and returned it to his own town to give it a decent burial. He placed the body in his own tomb. The people mourned, saying, a sad day, brother. After the funeral, the prophet said to his sons, when I die, bury me in the same tomb where, see, if it was me, I'd come back from the dead and haunt you. When I die, bury me in the same tomb where the holy man is buried, my bones alongside his bones. The message that he preached by God's command against the altar at Bethel and against all the sects and religion shrines in the towns of Samaria will come true. After this happened, Jeroboam kept right on doing evil, recruiting priests for the forbidden shrines indiscriminately. Anyone who wanted to be a priest could at one of the local shrines. Anyone who wanted to could be a priest at one of the local shrines. Terrible. Sounds like today. This was the root sin of Jeroboam's government, and it was this that ruined him. This is the word of the Lord.